let me just start the meeting again. Right, thank you everybody for turning up. It's a Teams meeting, it's probably the first one we've done. You've all had a chance to practice it. If you don't mind, for the benefit while we're in the meeting, you just keep your microphones on mute, and then when you want to speak, I'm hoping that you've all been made aware of the hands function at the top. If you could just raise your hands, then hopefully I'll be able to see that. I'll keep a check of and then to see who wants to speak. Otherwise, we all to speak at once. It'll be a bit of a mess. Also, for the benefit of everybody, the meeting will be recorded. It's one of those. I hope that that's been explained to you. There shouldn't be any issues with that. If you do, then please obviously speak to Gareth, and we'll go from there. Does anybody got any objections to that at the moment?
Nope.
No, great. Okay. Right. Okay, then if you're content with that, we'll start the meeting then with apologies for absence. Gareth.
No apologies, Chair. We're all absent, though. We do have 2 vacancies. And I don't know whether we should do a moment silent for the 2 members passed away.
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. So thank you. Sorry for interrupting there. My apologies. Right, many of you on the committee are aware of Roland Petard. He's been a long-standing member and he's certainly contributed a lot to local access, both for the Vale and for Bridgend. And certainly from my short time as being part of the Vale, I valued his contribution. You know, he's certainly a font of all knowledge and he contributed a lot to the as I say, to local access. I wondered if any of you just wanted to have a quick word about, as Gareth suggested, we'll have a minute's silence in reflection, but does anybody want to have a word about his contribution? Yeah, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to Roland, we also have unfortunately had the passing of 2 other members. One a past member in the name of Val Warlow.
Right, okay.
And then we have Robin Simpson.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. If we can have their families in our thoughts, then that would be appreciated, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you, Stu. That's important. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else? No? Okay then, Gareth. Would you mind just starting us off for the minute and let us know when that's finished, please?
Certainly. Thanks. I'll start now. Thank you, everyone. Just 1 minute. Thanks.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, everybody, for that. Yes, a moment to reflect on people who've done much for us. So thank you for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the appointment of vice chairman. So I'm hoping you've had time to think about that and you've got some nominations. Come on.
Anyone? Have the chair support, please.
Okay then.
Okay, yeah,
Who hasn't done chair then? Geraint, come on in.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll leave it as vacant, and we'll perhaps bring up something to consider next year.
Okay, it is quite important for me because clearly, I'd like to feel that I could rely on somebody if I'm not able to turn up to a meeting, whereas it just keeps getting juggled around otherwise. But yeah, okay. I'll have to speak to you privately, won't I? Okay, thanks for that. Okay, you've all had a chance to see the minutes of the last meeting some time ago. Most of the can I just accept them as a record of the meeting? Can I propose it? Seconder, please. I've got Stuart nodding and
seconded.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So that's that. All the matters on there are on the agenda anyway, so we can move forward with that. Right, okay, let's get to the first one, maintenance reports then. I'll take it to you, Gwyn, is it?
Unless Andy has made it into here. I know he was planning on attending. Let me have a look. No, he hasn't. So yes, it's me, I guess. The maintenance reports are sort of published in that little report. I guess we'll come on to this in the little verbal report about sort of COVID updates and sort of how it's affected us. So the maintenance reports for last year, they're not sort of showing an awful lot resolved. I think that's actually more of a symptom of it, of the data still mostly being with the sites and having not had made it onto the system so much as anything else. Yeah, it is showing a bit of a slump. I mean, obviously there was something of a slump as we lost all sort of volunteering activities for an awful long time, and we were even a bit edgy about contractors going out. So an awful lot of it started to be sort of carried out by, well, some of our rangers where possible. I mean, there was a period where we probably weren't doing that much, and there was also a period where we were probably focusing a little bit more on enforcement and just signage and information campaigns and things like that. So I would expect to see a little slump in our sort of day-to-day maintenance. But the levels that are sort of shown in the report are a little bit down, I think, on where the data actually should be. But other than that, it's all pretty much there to see.
Okay, any members want to? Yes, Frank.
I better unmute first. Yeah, just a quick question, and I apologise if I've forgotten all this, but what's the difference between maintenance and maintain when you're discussing the issues in the categories?
So there is no real difference. I mean, the main difference is that when we first had the survey done, we had it done by Exegesis that provided the original system that we were using, and they used a bunch of categories, including one that listed things as maintain. And following the commission of the original survey, which was in 2011 now, I think, we changed the categories around to make it a little more easy for us to deal with. So historical ones that have never really sort of moved are still being logged as maintain. So maintain and maintenance are basically the same thing. It's just a difference in recording sort of data-wise.
Fine, thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Jerry, yes.
Just a quick one for Gwyn. I'm doing some surveys in recent years. There's been quite a few electric fences on stiles, which, if you're not used to looking out for wire, it could give you a very nasty shock. Is any action taken when we've filled in the survey forms? And I mean, there's been one or two where they've been sort of hidden as well, which is obviously a bit naughty, in inverted commas.
Yeah, so the main sort of two things that we get on electric fences is either sort of where there's electric fence going over the middle of the footpath. We do sort of contact landowners because you can put the little brakes in them, like the levers that allow you to move it up. And so we will contact them and ask them to install one of those if they're not already in. And where we find them where they just sort of run them across the top of a stile, then we don't ask for the brakes to go in, but we do ask for them to be insulated running across the top. So I mean, where they've come to us, then usually we will sort of contact them and ask them to insulate the wire if it's sort of running across the stile. I don't think we've served any notices or sort of enforcement action in relation to it, but I know that I've spoken to people about insulating things.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay, so happy to move forward and note those? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item then is the legal orders, evidential modification orders update.
Sandra, would you like to give an update on the legal orders first?
Sure. The chart that I've placed before you is rather out of date now. There's been a fair few changes in the last week. If I can just run down by the ID number down the left-hand side, orders that have now been made and will be appearing in the press within the next 2 to 3 weeks are number 96, 98, 101, 102 and 103. On top of that, we have number 100 has now been confirmed, and that's the rollback at the coast path near Nash Point. That will be in the papers starting the consultation period this Thursday. And then 2 other confirmations that will be in within the next couple of weeks in the paper are, where are we? Number 97, Penmark 4, and number 101, Eglwys Brewis 1. And that's it, really.
Okay.
Things are moving along.
Okay.
Rebecca?
Nice. Yeah. When you say in the paper, which paper are you using now that we've lost the gem?
We're now in the Barrion district, which I've been assured is now covering the full Vale.
Okay, is it? Right.
And they're also on the Vale's website under the legal orders notices.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Frank?
Yes, Chairman. Can I just ask a clarification of number 83? I couldn't tell from the rather general map, but is it the newish footpath at the side of Pennyturn Pike Hill?
That's right. The new tarmacked ramp, which has gone in parallel to Pennyturn Pike Hill, is highway. But from that point leading up onto the new Ardwin development, that's the public right-of-way that we're aiming to put in. This went as far as order making quite a while back, but at that point I did receive an objection to it, and at the same time there was a difficulty with finding the finance to move on with it. Finance is in place now, and I'm returning to the objector in the next week or so to try and ensure that they withdraw their objection.
Can I ask a follow-up then, if I may, Sandra and Chairman? With that sort of footpath that's constructed presumably by the developers, does the Vale subsequently get any contribution towards future maintenance at all through Section 106 or anything like that?
I'll pass this across to Gwyn. Initially, the adopted highway section and the legal side of putting in that footpath onto the definitive map was 106 funded. But Gwyn, is there anything in there for the future?
Yeah, so for that one, originally the dedication of it was Section 106 funded, and the developers were sort of bringing it up to standard. There was a little bit of a hiccup because I think Highways sort of swallowed up some of that Section 106 money to improve the bottom where it connected down onto the road. But then we were able to sort of secure some more money from the developers eventually, which is enabling us to sort of progress the order. There's nothing in there for the future maintenance, as far as I'm aware, though. The Section 106 pot that was there and available was just the sort of capital amount to get it in the first place, rather than sort of retained for future maintenance after that.
Yeah, the reason I pose the question is it's a very, very steep slope, lots of trees around. It's going to be one that may well require maintenance in the future, well used presumably because there's no other alternative. Is there any way in which that can be built in better in the future, even if that one's lost?
Well, we're likely to try to put a little bit of money towards improving the surface again in the next financial year. I think that there's no more sort of Section 106 money that we can claw in for improving it further. But the surface that's been provided, it was fine at the beginning, is very loose gravel actually, and it's quite steep, and it's pretty sort of slippery underfoot. So what we will probably do is top it off with a more sort of bound surface, so that people don't end up skidding down it. We might even consider sticking a handrail on it as well, because it really is quite steep.
Yeah, I was trying to draw maybe a lesson for the future, that maybe when the Section 106 is being formed, we should put in a fairly big request for such money when we know there's going to be problems in the future. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the ordinary approach is to try to bring it up to such a spec that it's going to last for a good old while. This one was slightly different because we didn't receive Section 106 money to produce the footpath. The developers just built it as part of the rest of their scheme, and then the Section 106 money was just covering the legal costs, and that might be where it's gone awry a little bit. So we were sort of agreeing what was going in, but we didn't have that same sort of level of control over the build. But we were also conscious that with that development going in there, that was the obvious way that people were going to start walking, whether or not we put down a surface. So it was always going to need, well, we were much better off getting something in there to start off with, and then getting it dedicated. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian.
Just a query regarding Llambleddion 5051 Darren Farm. Obviously, there's been a rolling programme of closure notices for those paths. I assume it's planned that they'll carry on really until the development is virtually completed. I know part of the footpath you can walk now. So I was just wondering about the timing of this really. When is the timing of the what's it called, diversion, and how long these road closures will go on for? Any idea?
This diversion order was applied for considerable time ago, and it has taken some time to get it as far as making of the order. The order consultation period is a 4-week period. We then have to have it confirmed, so we're back with legal on their time frame, followed by another 6-week consultation period. So I think we're looking at 14 to 16 weeks.
Yeah, so now I assume
to complete.
There's a closure notice at the moment, I assume, still ongoing. The programme of closure notices are still ongoing at the same time as the diversion is going through. Because the footpaths are shut, you can't walk them.
Yeah, Gwyn, have you had any notification on this? I haven't heard of the temporary closures, if there's any intention to change.
When we look at sort of temporary closures, sort of first and foremost, we try to not concern ourselves so much with the diversion order unless the diversion would be of such a character that would move it out of the site completely. So the temporary closures really are there because the scale of the development is such that it needs to be sort of closed off whilst to make it safe, because they've got plant material going over the back and forth over the top of the path. They will probably continue to roll whilst that phase of development is going on, just because there's so much sort of traffic that's going on down there at the moment. It's in place at the moment. It's likely to, or we're likely to ask for an extension again. The point at which it becomes safe to open it up, either on the new line or the old, then that's when we will look to drop those closures. But for the moment, they're continuing to sort of roll on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? That's it on that item, so happy to move forward.
Shall I say something about the evidential modification?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say on the, great.
So yeah, the definitive map modification orders that we've got by there. I'm going to talk through those. This is one of the things that's been impacted by COVID, mostly because anybody sort of familiar with these will know that there's an awful lot of historical investigation that go into them. The archives offices have been closed, probably for the best part of the year now. Also, some of the other places that we would go for information, like the National Library for Wales, has been closed. Kew Gardens opened briefly, and in that sort of brief moment, we were able to get some information out of it. But for a bunch of these, it's been quite difficult to progress them. So Mill Lane in Boverton has been one that has been sort of rolling on for some time, as in the controversy around getting it recorded. We advanced that about as far as we can sort of during lockdown, and in fact we have the investigation report done in draft, subject to being able to verify bits of information in the archives when they open back up. So we're quite hopeful that that will be able to go to a committee with a recommendation as soon as we've had chance to search both Glamorgan archives and probably also the National Library for Wales, because we're aware that there's a sort of crucial piece of information in there, and that's reference number 20. Irevile in Troyes was an application that was put in probably a couple of months before lockdown, like sort of the tail end of 2019. There was a question on that. When you make these applications, then you have to serve notice on the landowner, and the land that was being affected was owned by a company that had been dissolved. So there was a question as to who exactly needed to be served on, and we were waiting for some legal advice on that. That's now been resolved, and the application's been accepted, but that sort of came during lockdown. So again, we're kind of waiting on archives to be able to sort of progress that. We've had a new application on footpath 73 at Clos Cymbarry. So that is in at the moment. That's probably the latest one that's come in. And Atlantic College in St Donat's, we had hoped to negotiate with the college around that. I last spoke to them probably about 8 weeks ago now, and I don't think there's any sort of movement coming on it. So we would probably pick that up again and also sort of investigate it. Dublin Road to Caradoc Avenue was one that we had sort of listed as dormant. I mean, in effect, it was a relatively academic application because the site that it sought to put a footpath through is now a big reservoir or sort of drainage retention scheme. We've been directed to determine that within the next 12 months from November. So that will, that will go to committee before November, and we'll make a decision on that one as well. Village Farmhouse in Colwinston. The applicants for that were the Community Council. We did sort of return to the Community Council and say to them that in order to progress it any further, really, we need more evidence. We had sort of previously completed interviews, but the application came in along with about sort of 6 evidence forms, and that was about it. And there's nothing in the documentary evidence to suggest anything. So I attended a community council meeting up in Colwinston and said, realistically, if you want us to progress this, then we're happy to do it. But at the moment, there's no real evidence to push it forward. If you would like us to carry it forward, then you probably need to drum up a bit more evidence of use, and it's been left with the community council to do that at the moment. So whether or not they come back with anything further that would allow us to do it, we'll wait and see on. If it doesn't look like it's going anywhere, then I guess we'll take that to committee at the same time as some of the others and just suggest that there's not enough evidence to make an order, probably. That's where we're up to on those.
Okay, thanks. Any questions, Stuart?
I wonder if I can ask Gwyn to clarify what the intention is with reference number 1, Clive Road. It's largely been overcome by the development of the housing down there, but then I guess there's the question about the steps. Can you say what the intent is? Do you need more proof, or is it in ABP's hands?
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that had sort of fallen into the same sort of category as Dublin Road. We were, in terms of sort of calls for this for it to be resolved, they'd all but dropped off because it was a bit of a local controversy that flared up and then was solved by some other solution. So we just kind of let sleeping dog lies and parked it. I think with having been sort of directed on Dublin Road that we need to conclude it, then we'll probably go back and have another sort of close look at what we need to do to make a decision one way or another on that one. And when we're looking at these things, we're not allowed to sort of take into account whether or not it would be useful to record a footpath there or not, or whether the problem that made the application arise has now been solved by other means. So it's not been one that we've been desperate to dive into, because it would mean that we'd have to put the substantive issue to the side and just look at the historical side of it, which would largely be sort of irrelevant. But I think we probably do need to go back and get it off the books, seeing as we're picking up some directions on some of the others. It's probably not going to be sort of top priority over some of the other ones that are there on the list and that got people sort of crying out to have them resolved there.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Gwyn. Thank you.
Anybody else? Sorry about that. Yeah. No? Okay, thanks. Ready to move on?
Yeah, Geraint Thomas. Geraint?
Yeah.
Geraint?
Yeah, I visited the Clive Road steps a few months back, and they were fine, but they were still fenced off. I was just wondering if you'd sort of get ABP to just remove the fencing across the steps.
Yeah, I guess that sort of plays into the same question. I mean, they're not sort of recorded as a public right of way at the moment, and that application was in to try to record them. It wasn't one that we'd pursued because there was other means of sort of getting around there that, I mean, appeared favourable, and the outcry had all but sort of disappeared. So I think when we go back and sort of take a look at it, then that'll be the question that we need to answer. Is it actually a public right of way? If it is, then at that point we would need to go back to ABP to discuss it. But if it is recorded as a public right of way, then the council would acquire sort of a substantial sort of maintenance burden in needing to continue to maintain those steps in perpetuity, presumably.
Okay.
Anybody else? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, then, moving on to the next item then. The COVID-19 impacts.
Yeah, so this was, I just wanted to give a little sort of verbal update, because I imagine that everybody is kind of interested in sort of how the last sort of year has looked for us with sort of COVID-19 like knocking about. So obviously when it first came in and everybody sort of everybody locked down, then we had some sort of unique problems sort of coming up, and those sort of first couple of weeks were taken up by either trying to conduct something of an information campaign. Really, you might have noticed when you were out and about, notices popping up on all of the styles. So that was something that we dived into and spent our time trying to get that bit of information out there. And the advice from Welsh Government was very fast-paced and changing as well at that time, as to how many people could go somewhere together and what restrictions were in place and weren't. And that led into quite a lot of instances of various sort of different landowners all over the county actually becoming sort of quite worried about the uplift in the number of people that were walking, particularly where those paths were going in very close proximity to either their properties or through their farmyards. So at that time we were partly dealing with what information and what support we could give them, which wasn't always an awful lot. I mean, we did try to provide sort of signage and things like that, but the reality was the only thing that people could do was go out and walk in the countryside. So you were kind of always going to see an increase in use. So there was that side of it. And then there was also the side of where people were literally just closing off paths. And so we did, I don't think we actually needed to serve any notices in the end, but we did have a number of contacts of trying to sort of resolve where those paths had been unlawfully closed. So with the exception of perhaps one notice that we did put in, but that came a little bit later. In addition to that, we did have, as the legislation moved on, then our advice was to close paths in certain circumstances, and those circumstances were if there was if the numbers of people that were congregating, and I think there were some pictures of loads of people at Ogmore Common at one point, which sort of fed into this, and an awful lot of people heading down to Snowdon and other sort of honeypot areas. Then we were to sort of close areas around that, and that obviously included some of the parks, and we took the decision to close a lot of the routes into the parks as that happened as well. In addition to that, we also closed around sort of St Donat's and around Atlantic College and some of the areas around there. And in fact, that was the only one that we went back to and also closed later on when the new school term started, and they had an influx of people from all over the globe, and the site was very active at that time as people were moving into their new accommodation. We thought it was wise to close that at the time. That sort of first period was an awful lot about just sort of noting that use had massively gone up, trying to keep the network open where it needed to be, and trying to manage things where people were so concerned about it. It was a very, very busy time for us. Then we also had obviously the lack of sort of volunteer support. We were unable to liaise and rely on sort of volunteers that we would normally do through Valeways or through the ones that were directly being run by the parks and the Ramblers Association. So there was a little bit more of direct works to be done by ourselves. And that was sort of the pattern that continued, really. One of the things that was sort of quite surprising was the amount of external grant money that became available. At first, we were expecting everything to completely dry up, and it did look as if that was happening. But then as time went on, we seemed to be picking up extra grants from all over the place. So the tail end of this financial year, really, has kept us very, very busy with trying to sort of get some of these projects done, and that has been in the also within the framework of being sort of a little bit restricted in how we were able to deliver those, because the contractors, I mean, some of those have been affected by COVID impacts and needed to pull teams off and put them back on, and the way they work might be a little bit slower as well. So yeah, it's been an interesting time. In a sense, the profile of countryside access has almost sort of gone up a little bit, and that might even sort of account for some of the additional money that that's ended up sort of finding its way to us from external sources, perhaps. But yeah, we've certainly been kept very busy and had to alter the way in which we would deliver maintenance that we might previously have been used to. It's obviously also impacted on certain projects. So the Green Trails project, which I think I'm going to say a little bit more about later as well, we did have a big, very wide sort of volunteer survey program that was sort of designed to try to help sort of deliver a feasibility study for making this big, long bridleway route. And that was pretty much ready to go just as lockdown came in. So that all of a sudden sort of stopped. It's got on the way of doing those sorts of tasks and jobs as well. But yeah, I think that's a sort of rough sort of précis of how our years looked. But happy to take some questions on it.
Okay, any questions? Stuart.
Gwyn, I guess a lot of us are frequent walkers, enjoying the countryside, in some cases walking dogs. The degradation that has taken place across the network where I've been walking, which is obviously in the eastern part of the Vale, is quite remarkable. I mean, whether it be a surfaced path or whether it be unsurfaced and just ground, really, we're walking through anything but pleasant territory in lots of places. I know there are pinch points, but they're going to stay pinch points as well, because the mud is now so deep. And they're just going to hold the water. But the level of walkers' activity is incredible. I've never seen as many people out walking, and I like seeing it. But the degradation to the network is remarkable. There's going to be some need to rectify some of these areas, some of the pinch points. Geraint, I know, walks around some of the same areas as I walk around, and you know, it's not up to your knees, but it's certainly coming up towards the top of your boots now. So we don't walk through the mud anymore. We unfortunately are going into the side grounds and walking through coppice and woods and stuff like that, and that's suffering as well. Any plans?
Yeah, so I think as you say, the amount of activity on the network has, I mean, anecdotally, I guess, but I mean, it's clearly sort of massively gone up, and that's increased the pressure on the surfaces. I mean, in addition to that, we should probably add that the weather at the start of the year, the floods were sort of quite widely sort of publicised, but that has really sort of impacted in it on the network as well, particularly when you combine it with high footfall, and in places even where we had sort of projects going on where they didn't stop in time, then that's it's probably sort of made a step backwards rather than forwards in what we're doing. In terms of like how to address it, I mean, this year we picked up the Access Improvement Grant, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment about where we spent some of the money this year. In addition to that, however, the same grant is making a return next year, and it's kind of sort of premised on very similar terms to the old ROIP grant that obviously made sort of such a difference back then. Other than it's more money. So the ROIP grant, I mean, it varied at different points in its life between sort of about £39,000 at its maximum, and it eventually sort of came down to about 30 grand. And we could spend that on, I mean, all of the sorts of things that we want to spend it on, really. We've got an allocation next year for £68,000. So we just sort of stuck in our work programme for what we intend to do for that. And a bunch of, sort of reserves as well. So that is both going to enable us to sort of carry out some projects that that have previously been sort of identified to us as sort of needing doing, but it'll also sort of ease some of the pressure just on our own maintenance budget. So like the things that you're talking about there, if you know sort of specific pinch points and areas, we're going to be in a much better position to be able to sort of come out and pop a little bit stone down or something like that and try to resolve it. So I mean, if you know that there's areas that are really sort of feeling the pinch, then we're really interested to hear what they are. Particularly if they're longer stretches, because it's difficult to do bits of surfacing quickly unless it's a very small pinch point without sort of getting suds. So I hope that sort of helps answer that question a little bit.
Can I just come back on that then, Gwyn? Photographic evidence obviously would help you together with grid references or 3 words or whatever. Do you have any thoughts or plans to ask for more money? Because I don't know what it is like where you are, but around Dinas Powys and around Sully, I mean, it is really deteriorated. In some places, we're not even walking on the paths anymore. We're walking through the fields because you've got stretches that are 50 meters, 100 meters long.
Okay.
Just like the cattle have gone through. Unfortunately, these are human footprints.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of asking for like increases in our revenue budget, that's not something that I had sort of considered asking for, because everything is so pressured after COVID. I mean, I will say I appreciate that there's an awful lot of pressure on the rights of way network. I mean, everybody's sort of scratching around for money a little bit, but yeah, so it tends to be sort of specific projects that we will try to sort of seek support for. The ones that we've put in for are by and large the ones that we knew about prior to COVID or had already been identified to us. I mean, we've also got to be a little bit sort of conscious about our capacity to actually sort of deliver the projects. We're quite a small team, and sometimes just asking for loads more money and not having extra members of staff to run the projects and deliver them can just mean that we're sort of running around in circles a little bit. But yeah, no, I take the point. Yeah, we've got access to additional money to deliver sort of specific schemes. We've been successful in getting some capital funding for other schemes, such as down at Ladfanoch and the coast path there, which has been sort of particularly atrocious. So that is being supported internally by the council as well. So I mean, in terms of overall spend compared to previous years, we're actually doing sort of very well. I haven't asked for an increase in our revenue budget or anything like that, though, to answer the question.
Can I just come back one more time, please? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's COVID related. Why not ask for some COVID money?
Okay, no, take your point.
I think
Thank you.
It's Jerry. I think I got my hand up.
Sorry, I've got Sean first.
Okay.
Sean coming through first, Jerry. Sean?
Thank you. I was just going to ask, the temporary restrictions that were put in COVID related, have they all been lifted now?
They're all lifted now, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks. That was short and sweet, wasn't it? So, Jerry.
Thank you. Just going on from what Stuart said, I live next door to the gate at Seal Park in Dinas Powys, and we've had over the last few months countless streams of cars parking on the pavement, blocking drives, families trundling off down a couple of footpaths leading on to Penny Turnpike and towards Landock Hospital. And I can only echo what Stuart said. These people haven't ever seen in my life before, turning up with complete families, prams, picnic baskets, everything, go wandering off, not on the footpath, doing all sorts of strange things, making a total mess. And I think I may have to comment on the NRW access reform briefing note there, that access to the countryside is absolutely great, but most people who access it who don't already haven't got a clue about anything. And it's a bit worrying because they can get themselves into all sorts of trouble with livestock and especially children, and parking. because they've all got to drive somewhere to get to a public right of way, and you can't have people parking on the side of a country lane just because they want to go for a walk. It's sort of a bit incompatible in some ways. I know it's all in the heat of the moment, but I think it'll stir up a big awakening in people who want to access the countryside. But it's certainly a problem.
Yeah, I would agree. That's been recognised previously, hasn't it? The more we increase access, we need to increase the awareness of the requirements of what they need to do to access areas, isn't it? And not leave the waste behind. That's been key, hasn't it?
Well, it isn't only that. It's almost as if they regard it as an adventure playground and just want to run around and do all sorts of things. And we've had a couple of landowners chasing after people, fiddling around with horses and stuff, basically trespass, because these people aren't aware of what trespass is and what a public right of way is. So perhaps there's some sort of need of some explanatory notes, or I don't know, a public awareness program. It all scales into insignificance in the current climate, of course, but it's a problem that's going to keep on going, I think. Ooh.
Okay, we'll note that. Ian?
Yes, it's a bit of an old chestnut of mine, but I feel that the widths of paths are very important. Obviously, if you have a narrow path, you get much more wear when you've got heavy traffic going through. And I think something where obviously it should be borne in mind when there's diversions put through, that they should be wide enough, not fenced too close together. And also when there's thick hedges, we should always have a campaign, I think, of cutting hedges back where possible to widen the footpaths out as much as they can. And this would prevent wear in sort of on narrow paths. So I think it's a particular problem.
Common problems, aren't they? Common problems. I don't know what the answer is to that. So, I don't suppose there is any at the moment, is there?
Yeah, I mean, we know from our experience on the Wales Coast Path that if you confine a very well-used route, then it's just going to become a quagmire. And we've ended up surfacing an awful lot of that. Just, I mean, with sort of rough type 1 stone that we pop down and it kind of beds in and gives it a little bit of structure. I imagine that if sort of use continues at the current levels, then we're going to be looking at doing something similar in sort of quite a few places, particularly on sort of urban fringe areas.
I mean, one local example to myself is the Cowbridge diversion around the Cowbridge Comprehensive School, where it's obviously been fenced off around, and in certain places it's really narrow. And one area there's a thick hedge, the hedge could easily be clipped back, widen the footpath out, and that would reduce the amount of wear. People would spread out.
Yeah,
as somebody previously said, people are doing that anyway as much as they can. Where you can, you obviously do it. Where the footpath is not fenced off, you spread out and widen the footpath naturally. But where you're fenced off, or hedges and fences, you can't. You just stick to a narrow route, and that's where it gets really muddy.
Yeah, and that's also an area where we're planning on putting some stone down, because we were already quite conscious of just how muddy that was getting. It was probably getting a lot of use from people sort of going past the school, and again, because it's on the urban fringe. So we'll expect to see some rough surfacing down here as well, probably some type 1 stone going down.
Yeah, that's good. Very good.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, I seem to have lost everybody off the screen for the moment. So there are no hands up on the using the hands displayed. So we'll move on to the next item then. Win.
Okay, so
yeah,
I think that this is the access improvement grant.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah. Okay. So to sort of pick up on what I was just saying then, we were sort of quite fortunate actually in this sort of last financial year to see the return of an access improvement grant that looked very much like the old ROIP grant, although this time it was being administered directly from the Welsh Government rather than sort of via NRW. So we were able to flag up spending on either sort of physical improvements to existing routes, improvements to information and promotion, access to open space and green spaces, and also to make any sort of access to or on the rights of way network easier for people who find it difficult. And we initially had an allocation of about £44,000 sort of come through to us, and similar to the old ROIP grants, that was like a hypothecated amount that we were able to identify projects up to that amount. So when I stuck that in, I was a little bit cheeky. I put in the an allocation to the full amount, and then I also gave a list of sort of reserve projects in the hope that either we'd be able to fall back on them if something went wrong, or as occasionally sort of happens with these grants, they find a little bit more money from somewhere, and then we're in a good position to pick them up because we've already identified them, which is indeed what happened. And so we were actually able to get our reserve projects financed as well. So we picked up an extra £72,900 worth of, well, we picked up in total £72,900 worth of funding for the for improvements on the network or to do with information going around it. And those projects were, I mean, Newton House Farm, for anybody that's ever had to sort of walk through there, will, I mean, if they've ever managed to actually walk through there, you tend to end up to your knees in a mix of, sort of mud and silage. We spec'd up a project for that. Now, that one, we commenced the project, and this is sort of similarly to a little bit sort of further down on the table, if you've got it in front of you, footpath 31, which is going down from the tip into Porthkerry Park. Both of those, footpath 31 had commenced and was doing really well and looked great, and then like the floods sort of came in January, and they just sort of, a combination of the amount of water and the ground conditions, and the contractors probably not stopping as quickly as they should have, ended up sort of destroying an awful lot of the progress that had been made on that. So that one was affected by the weather. Newton House Farm, the initial sort of preliminaries and setups we did, and then sort of stopped. And having had that experience on footpath 31, we sort of pulled off that site and said, you know what, don't commence it, or it's going to end up going the same way. So both of those projects are sort of part way through and will be completed in the new financial year. We picked up spent money on stocking up on small-scale infrastructure and sort of materials for that. We managed to pick up 30 new kissing gates and sort of 5 2-in-1 gates for installation in and around the county. A bunch of those have already gone in. A number of them will also be installed sort of next year, because this grant is, as I said earlier, returning sort of next year, so we can sort of spend some of the money on sort of labourers and contractors to put those in. We've restocked all of our waymarking discs, so we've got a nice supply of that then. So some of the other projects that we're doing, we've picked up a like a laser etching machine, and that is going to allow us to produce easy signage to sort of any design that we want. And in particular, it means that whenever we do a legal order, then we're going to be able to just print out onto wood or into metal or whatever we want real quickly the order map and the changes in the network. So rather than it being a bit of flappy paper in sort of plastic that cows tend to eat or just blow off in the wind, then that will actually be a relatively sort of long-lasting sign that is going to be able to sort of show changes in the network. We do also get lots of requests back from landowners and farmers for bespoke bits of signage or maps of particular areas to help the public sort of navigate through the area. So we're going to be able to sort of produce those and charge those back to the landowners, because they're usually actually quite keen to buy those. So we've got a lot of applications on that. That also helps with some of the coastal access signage rules that have changed to try and reduce the amount of sort of signage clutter. So we're going to be able to produce things that are bespoke for individual locations. So that's going to be quite useful, and might even return a bit of money back to the council in the long term. We've also picked up some equipment to survey our routes with a 360-degree camera, so that we can then get that processed and uploaded onto Street View. And that is being supported by, we've picked up a Kickstart employee, so it's like a government employment sort of service, like grant. So we got somebody who started today. We were all down in sort of Barry trying to sort him out with all those bits of equipment and get him set up on that project. So that is beginning by getting all of the Vale Trails promoted routes up onto Street View, and hopefully you will be able to sort of navigate them by going onto Google Maps, and that kind of plays into the helping people with that find the network difficult to use to get out, or even just to be able to sort of engage with it a little bit and access it. And then we picked up some boardwalk materials for, again, they'll probably be installed next year, but the materials have been purchased on this year. That is to sort of assist with the stretch in the bottom of Porthcurry Park to sort of continue along the Wales Coast Path at the bottom of the bulwarks. And we also had another one in Porthcurry Park, from the car park down to the beach. That's all sort of been resurfaced and re-edged. That's all looking sort of pretty smart now as well. So yeah, so that's what we've done with that grant this year. Next year, we're looking to do surfacing projects. We've got 2 projects in Lantwick Major that we're trying to look to fund. That's one next to the cemetery path. Next to the cemetery, which is an extension of a bit of surfacing that we previously did. There's another one down near the school next to the brook. So we're going to have a look at doing that as well. We've put in a big allocation for small scale infrastructure again, so that we can get some of the kits that we've put in this year installed, and pick up any more that we might want to do something with. What else are we doing with that? Yeah, we've got a couple of other projects on that. We're supporting trying to resolve some of the issues on the anomalies list, which is sort of some of the historical mapping issues that Sandra has been trying to sort of compile and work with over the last couple of years. Doing a little bit more to try to, a little bit, a very sort of small amount to try to continue with that sort of Street View project, and then also just trying to sort of finish off some of the projects that we didn't manage to get sort of finished this year. So that, but it's really good that we've had this grant both this year, which came as a bit of a surprise, and then we've also picked up this next year as well. So again, I've put in a bunch of reserve projects in the hope that we might be able to pick up some additional money as we go along. So I'm sort of keeping my fingers crossed for that as well.
Great, thanks for that. Any members? No? Okay. Yes, there's quite a lot going on, Gwyn, in spite of the situation that we're in. So, and it's good to see we've got some money's coming in. Rebecca, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I've been told the footpath improvement going down to the Lantwick coast, and I've noticed it a lot on the Boverton Brook footpaths. It's being more and more used by bikes, and a number of dog walkers have said to me that they've actually been quite frightened with the number of bikes on the new path down to the coast.
Okay. Yeah, I should probably mention that as well, because that wasn't actually part of the Access Improvement Grant. That was part of an economic stimulus fund, which enabled us to do everything down from the farm along the top of the western ridge down to the Cwmcolw, and that's all completed now, which also looks great. So there's mountain bikes or something using it, are they?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, most of that is actually pretty wide. Is it the bottom section that reduces down a little bit that they've got concerns about?
Well, it's just if you get 2 or 3 mountain bikes, which shouldn't be there anyway, because it's a public right of way, isn't it? I mean, it's the same at Lavernock. I've had issues on the coast path with groups of bikes. And it, you know, a couple of dog walkers have said to me that it, you know, they've had to sort of pull their dog out the way pretty sharpish.
Yeah. It's not always the easiest thing to deal with down there, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think we could put any barriers down there to physically sort of restrict them. And they'll probably be against the principles of least accessible, sort of most accessible access anyway. We'll perhaps if we say that we'll monitor it for the moment. I mean, I think even in places where we have sort of littered places with signs, frankly, it hasn't made an awful lot of impact, and you can just end up sort of making it look a bit untidy with no cycling signs all over the place. For actually how many cyclists there is. So perhaps if we just continue to monitor it, I think the answer might just be that there will always be a certain level of that sort of type of access on the popular routes where people want to go. If it becomes a real like health and safety problem, then I guess the only sort of solution that's actually going to restrict people is putting in sort of squeezer styles and things like that, which we don't really want to have to do. So perhaps let's monitor it for the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you for that. That's thanks for that, Gwyn. That's useful. Right, enabling natural resources and well-being in Wales, green trails.
Okay, or do you want coastal access first?
I'm glad you're keeping my eye on the agenda. You just keep going, all right?
Okay. Coastal access has obviously sort of continued again. There's a good sort of list of projects there in the documents that have been provided. The most sort of significant spend this year was in trying to realign the path back along sort of Nash Point to St Donat's, where it becomes really quite sort of precarious next to the edge. It was actually quite an awful long sort of stretch of fence line and an awful long bit of path to move back into the field. So there was a compensation amount that was calculated and agreed to support that. We've got a study for the bulwarks that has been commissioned, and that's going to enable us to start to look at what scheme we can actually deliver on that, because that's something that's sort of popped back and forth onto our list sort of over many years. We've never really quite been able to nail down how exactly to solve the problem of like really sort of slippery, quite steep access on a scheduled nature monument site. But last year we had a archaeological assessment sort of carried out, which has enabled us to go on and sort of bring that to a landscape architect to come up with a scheme. So that's kind of a prelim for next year. The section around Aberthorpe Power Station, if you've been down there, that had been sort of very, very wet. So we've sort of almost like one little concourse through there and lifted the level of the path up. So that's now great and bone dry. We sort of extended that a little bit this year as well. So that is pretty much all done now. We'd sort of gone back and forth on Monknash quite a bit. The last sort of contact that we had with sort of NRW on it, they weren't very happy with the plans that we'd had sort of drawn up, because I think they felt that it was too much impact on the triple SI. So we've done a little bit of prelims this year in trying to sort of reduce that scheme right down to its bare bones. So again, that is hopefully something that we'll be able to pick up delivery of sort of next year. And then at Cwmcolw Lifeguard Station last year, we replaced some of the step fronts which were rotting with sort of concrete risers, but we only had enough money to do about half of them. So we've got a bit more money this year again to chuck that back in and do the rest of them. So that's that's going on at the moment. We also, again, for this grant, the possibility of some extra spend came up right at the end of last calendar year, so right at the end of December 2020. So we are refurbishing and replacing refurbishing the escape ladders at the bottom of Cumbach, because they've got very wobbly and a bit precarious. So they are in the process right now, in fact, of being repaired and all sorted out. And also the steps down to and through Cwm Mawr, they also were starting to sort of show their age a little bit, although they've only been in sort of 10 years or so. And they are getting a bit of a refurbishment and sorting out down there as well. So all in all, on sort of coastal access, again, a pretty sort of good year in terms of the amount of money sort of coming in and being spent on the network. £87,000 puts us in sort of right in some of the top spenders of Welsh authorities on our network there. So if that's any indication, yeah.
Oh, great news, great news. Any members? Right, I've got a hand. It's Frank. Yes.
Oh, thanks, Chairman. Can I first say that in looking at the programmes, I'm delighted with what's been able to be achieved given the circumstances, and I think we should say to the Public Rights Away team, well done anyway. It's great to see all this. I was just going to ask one technical question. The escape ladders, they're obviously vital, a very good thing, but what's the situation with liability if people use them and come unstuck?
Yeah, we kind of, it's not an easy question to answer, and we did go round in circles for some time as to what we should or shouldn't be doing down there. They were, as far as we're aware, sort of installed. They were installed historically, we think, sort of with public money. They were certainly refurbished with the assistance of our engineering department, probably about sort of 15 to 20 years ago. I don't know, maybe even longer than that. I think where we landed on it was that they're there. People know that they're there, and if you take them away and somebody walks around the edge of the cliff and then they drown, then I mean it's pretty clear that that the liability sort of at the very least has the potential to sort of come back on that, and it then becomes a question of who actually is responsible for maintaining them. And there's not a very clear answer for that. It seems to have just been whoever in the council has had money to do it at any particular time. So there was an opportunity to pick up coastal access money and do it, and that seemed to sort of fit the bill sort of quite nicely on it. I'm not sure that we ever got to the end of a definitive answer on whether they should be there at all and whose liability it would be, other than we know that it would be a very bad outcome if they're not done.
Sounds a very sensible answer. Thank you.
It does, and you're right. It's had some discussion. If anything, they're a novelty factor, aren't they? That they're there in the first place. But
if you've ever tried them, they're pretty difficult.
Well, if you tried them in the last 6 months, then they'd be even more worrying, because you can stand on them and you rock them and the bolt comes in and out of the side of the cliff where it's been eroded away. So so they're all going to be sort of secure and sorted out. And there's people on site doing it like right now. Well, not right now, but today there was.
Great. Okay, thanks. Stuart.
Just some feedback on a domestic point of view. On one occasion, I tried to encourage my wife to climb those escape steps, and she's not very happy about ladders at all. She went up a shorter number of steps and said, "No, I can't do this." So I came up behind her and really encapsulated her like a safety hoop, and she said, "No, I don't wish to go any further. The ladder has moved away from the face of the cliff so she could see a gap." And she said, I must get down onto the beach. I must get down on the beach. And I said, "Why? It's quite safe. I'm behind you. You won't go anywhere." I would sooner drown than go up those steps, she said. And she's downstairs, so she can't hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, they were looking a bit ropey. But in addition, the when you get off the ladders onto the top, I mean, it's a bit of a scramble up some of the stones there. So a part of the contract is to try to make that a little bit easier to get up as well.
Thank you very much for that. Next time I'm there, I'll see if I can encourage my wife to climb.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nothing worse than getting to the top of the ladder, realising you're not on safe ground yet. You know what I mean? But there we are. Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Anybody else? No. Okay then. Right. Let's see if I can get the right item this time. Then item 9.
So yeah, enabling natural resources and wellbeing in Wales. So this is our sort of NRAW grant, and you might recall, because it was sort of knocking around when we did last meet, that we had a project to run a feasibility study for something called Green Trails, and what we were looking at doing was creating a regional route that ran through Bridgend, the Vale, Cardiff, RCT, and a little bit up towards Merthyr as well, that was aimed at bridleway traffic, so horses, and also sort of cyclists, because cyclists can use bridleways, although more sort of trail bikes and mountain bikes for that. So we had an officer employed who was carrying out this report and survey. That was frustrated a little bit by COVID, as I mentioned earlier, the surveying element of it, which was sort of the big sort of final push to get that done, kind of went out the window when nobody was allowed to leave the houses. Since then, I mean, we did sort of between all the different partners find a little bit of money to keep him on and complete it over the last year, and so the surveying has been sort of carried out as a little solo endeavour as soon as we were able to get people back out, and the report has been sort of produced. In draft, but it's as close to finished as it's going to get. And so we had been sort of looking at how we were then sort of going to deliver this project, having got a feasibility study. Now, all the way sort of back in like February last year, I think it was, we submitted a follow-up bid to build on the program that we were expecting to be able to publish, and we didn't actually hear about any progress on it, and we kind of assumed that this was one of the grants that had got canned in favour of trying to sort of fund COVID relief measures, and then almost sort of out of the blue, really, in about September, October time, we found out that actually our expression of interest had been successful. It hadn't just sort of been successful; it was one of the sort of top performing EOIs of all the ones that had gone in, which was great. So we sort of found out sort of further to that I mean the competitive stage of that process was the EOI side of it. So the formal process is really sort of just double checking terms and conditions and eligibility. So that application has been sort of submitted. So yeah, this is a project that, barring anything extraordinary happening, we are expecting to get funded. The value of it is £1,046,000 until sort of June 2023, and that is going to be covering the delivery. Vale is the lead partner on. So that will result, the way that we're intending to spend that money, I mean, other than on the obvious way, on sort of delivery of actual physical infrastructure and the creation of rights and legal processes and compensation associated with that, is we will be recruiting a team to deal with it. So that's going to consist of a project officer, who's doing some of the more legal side of it and perhaps some of the more project management bits on it. Then we've got 2 field officers that are going to be sort of dealing with contractors and also hopefully engaging user groups and members of sort of local communities to do some sort of volunteer improvements on the network to bring it about. Then a big part of the project is also the biodiversity side of it and ecological value, because it was always an intention of us to try to couple up these like green corridors that we either wanted to create or improve or maintain with biodiversity and ecology benefits. So we're recruiting a biodiversity officer that will be part and parcel of that team. And yeah, so we expect to be able to, well, as soon as we've got a formal offer of grant, then hopefully we'll be able to get some people in place and start sort of delivering on that. But it is a substantial amount of money to cover in the region. So we were really quite excited about the prospect of being able to deliver that. And yeah, some of the other details of it are in the report that's appended.
Thanks, Gwyn. Jerry.
Thank you, Chairman. Gwyn, is this the, I'm trying to cast my mind back, was the southernmost end intended to be Leckworth Woods area where there's going to be some sort of possible parking, cafe, I don't know, assembly area where people could launch northwards?
Yeah, so we'd actually put in a previous bid that had been refused, and that one was a lot more sort of focused on trying to create a bike park in Leckworth Woods that would act as a gateway for the rest of the network, but also hopefully try to provide a means of sort of making it a bit more sort of financially sustainable in the long term. So in the new bid that we put in, we reduced that down an awful lot. We still kept it in, so it is still part of the project, but it's mostly sort of focused around sort of the feasibility of being able to do that and some of those planning and preliminaries, rather than actually sort of delivering that. So it's still in there, but it's less of a facet than it was in the previous bid, mostly because the previous bid it was unsuccessful, and so we wanted to try to steer it towards the criteria that we thought it would meet.
Okay, thank you. I also at the back of my mind, there was some housing development proposed possibly in that area, and I just wondered if there'd be any conflict with that, because I think something about the bridge over the old bridge, 1930s bridge or whatever, over the River Ely would be closed, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, well, within the allocation, the actions that we were sort of planning for that site are really around sort of business planning and sort of site feasibility. So anything of that ilk will hopefully be picked up in the feasibility studies that we commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I ask two questions? One, if the Vale is hosting this team on behalf of the region, I assume that a good chunk of the costs will be to reimburse the Vale for accommodation and all the rest of the costs associated with that. Is that right?
Yeah, I memean, to be clear, this is a 100% grant. So, I mean, there's no match funding or anything like that. Yeah, all of the costs are paid for, and then there's also an allocation for overheads that we can sort of pick up within it as well.
My second question is related to the idea of sustainability and the environmental part of it. With places like Leckworth Woods, if it's still in your mind, can I ask what's the current management regime there? Because there are a lot of mature trees, a lot of... I'd be very concerned if we invited people into that sort of territory without having had a good look at it and resourced the proper management regime for the woodland. And that must apply to other areas as well, but using that as an example, is there any ongoing management of that area?
As of right now, I'm not sure that I can answer that question, because if there is, I'm not aware of it. I mean, what I would say in relation to this project, The project partners are the 5 local authorities that are involved, but then a number of sort of third sector organisations, including the Wildlife Trust. And one of the things that was the Wildlife Trust said that they found most exciting was the prospect of being able to come up with like a proper sort of combined management plan for Leckwith Woods that ties into any of the feasibility studies. So that is one of the areas of the project that they were most interested in, and I mean, the nature of the project is that it's supposed to be sort of coupling up those sort of ecological and landscape management aspects with something practical as well. So I can't tell you what it is at the moment, but certainly the intention is to come out. If we're going to come out with something at all, then it's going to be sort of very sympathetic to those ideals.
Can I follow up that then? You know, in relation to my earlier question about Penny Turnpike and the path there, that if something comes of that project and that ideal, which is great, I mean, it's potentially very good, will there therefore then be ongoing management costs built in to look after the woodland as well as just, you know, enjoy it, as it were? With the best will in the world, it's going to be costly, and you want it to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, the hope, the entire sort of purpose of doing something in Leckwith Woods was that it would have a sort of financially sustainable aspect to it. So I mean, I think if it came back and it wasn't any way to make it viable in that degree, then I'm not sure how fervently it would be sort of pursued. But the objectives that we got in are very much sort of scoping and feasibility. So whilst I can say what we hope to get out of the studies, and until they're done, I can't really sort of tell you what those answers are.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great bit of news on the investment itself, isn't it? So,
it is, yeah. It's better than the Vale's cap.
Yeah, yeah, great. Okay, anybody else? No, thank you for that. Okay, Gwyn, it's the railway walks.
Yeah, I was just including this as a verbal update, I mean, partly because there's not an awful lot to sort of write down about at the moment, but it is on the horizon. So Network Rail have sort of been in contact. Again, it's almost just sort of like a little regional thing. They are looking to produce a series of walks and like circular walks that link into railway stations. So we had a meeting and some contact with them as to how they're going to go about sort of doing that at the moment, but it is very much at the preliminary stage. There might be opportunities for the LAF to sort of consider what routes might be worth sort of suggesting to them. So yeah, these are going to be circular walks that are going to be promoted by Network Rail at their railway stations that take you on either on like circular walks around a locality or to a particular destination, and then back again to the railways. So yeah, that's just a little project that you might sort of see something about that is on the horizon, sort of depending on sort of how enthusiastically they pursue it, I guess.
Okay, thanks. Any members? No, that's good. It's another. Oh, sorry, Geraint. Yeah.
To me, I've already put a boost to Lantwick Major and coming back by the train on the Ramblers routes, which is an obvious one, I think, for they do the coast path and your newly refurbished path back into Lantwick.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of different sort of ones that they were looking at, and I think they had gone through the what the Ramblers were already suggesting. So so yeah, I mean, when I have something more substantial, then if that sort of fits in with the LAF, then it might be an interesting one for you to have a look at, so we can feed back to them.
Yeah.
But as it might get some traction in various different sort of areas and different channels, so it might be nice if you sort of knew that it was on the horizon.
Good. it's always good to link, isn't it? Getting to different places, and so that's another useful initiative. After as long as we don't find as we found in the past, it duplicates something that's already there. But great. Stuart. Not heard you yet, Stuart. Are you on mute?
Yeah, he's still on mute, Chair. Stuart, are you there?
My apologies, I'm here now. I pressed it, but obviously not hard enough. It's a question for Gwyn, if I may, please. Gwyn, a while back, Network Rail came forward with some proposals to remove access across the tracks and reroute walks across the bridges that could be nearby or could be quite a distance away. Has that been put to bed, or if I'm being cynical, not that I am normally, is the development of walks around railway stations a sweetener before they come back and reintroduce their proposals to shut track access or footpaths going across tracks?
Now, they're separate items. I mean, the people that were leading and involved in the railway walks are different to the ones that are working on the network. The proposals that we previously had to try to look at level crossings that were sort of up and down the county, they sort of largely ground to a halt when a lot of their funding disappeared in a spending review. I did actually meet with them about 2 weeks ago, and a couple of them they're picking back up again. So they're the much more sensible ones, to be honest. So it may be that those proposals begin to sort of come back in a bit of a piecemeal way. The most significant one is probably sort of down at Aberthaw station, where there's an existing public footpath that goes across a railway track. I mean, there's no way to actually cross it. I mean, we had looked at trying to divert the path under a bridge and received some objections to it. Network Rail advised me that they've actually now found the funding to properly construct a railway, a level crossing across it. So I'm expecting something to move on that one. So in a strange way, they're looking to sort of put perhaps more crossings in than out as of right now. The other one that they were looking to try and sort of pick back up and have another close look at again was, I forget the name of the farm, but there's a path where the path sort of comes across the railway line and then goes down a field only to go back across it again. And so we had been looking at running that down the railway verge and then up their sort of service steps to avoid having to go across sort of both the railway line twice, and also, to be honest, as soon as you've crossed over the railway line, you're into a bit of a quagmire, and it's really swampy ground that's almost impassable at best of times anyway. So it's still sort of bouncing around, but it's a sort of much sort of reduced proposals, because I think when we were discussing it before, we were expecting about 5 or 6 different proposals to come in, but now it's a bit more piecemeal as and when they get the funding.
Okay, thank you for that response. Appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, when you mentioned Aberthaw, I thought you were going to mention Roos as well, because of the housing development that's across that track at the back there. So, yeah.
Yeah, they did mention that as well. I can't recall off the top of my head where they were going with that one, though. Yeah, I can find out about that one for next time if you're interested, though.
That's fine, Gwyn. That's great. The fact is that the Network Rail are looking to do some promotion, which is excellent, isn't it? So, okay, then if we go on to the right of way improvement plan.
Yeah, I've left this as a verbal update as well. I mean, mostly because it's been a sort of pretty chock-a-block year, as you can sort of see from all of the different projects that we've been running and trying to sort of keep up with COVID as well. So this just to sort of pick back up on sort of where we were almost. The ROIP draft is pretty much there, but sort of needs like completing to be able to sort of take to cabinet, I assume. After which we'll be sticking it out for consultation. So it's not been out to consultation yet, as you will be aware, because like you would have been the first people to be told. It's probably been on a little bit of a back burner during this sort of COVID period. Very, very conscious that it needs to be sort of picked up and published, though. So yeah, that's kind of where it is at the moment. And there's nothing sort of more substantial that warranted more than a verbal update on it.
Okay, yeah, and clearly there's a lot going on, as you know, not just COVID, but now we've got all the elections and stuff. So, but so when do you think that will become available to?
Yeah. Yeah, as I guess as soon as we're able to sort of polish it off and get a cabinet date, I'm very conscious that I keep on sort of promising that it'll be imminent, and something else comes up and sort of kicks the can down the road a bit.
Yeah.
I guess sort of realistically, probably looking at the sometime in the summer.
Yeah. Okay. 3 months then, shall we?
Yeah.
Over there. I'm a deadline.
Sure, why not?
I'm a deadline. I can't help it. If you give me a 3 months date, then I'm happy with that. Say summer, I'm thinking, oh, is that the last day of summer then? Is it? You know. Okay. Nothing heard. I'll leave that with you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. The last one then is the access reform briefing note.
Yep, so just included this to kind of keep you up to date on where that's heading and what the process is. There's been sort of 3 expert working groups that have been looking at sort of various questions on access reform. You'll obviously sort of recall that the Local Access Forum gave its views on the consultation that was released probably some years ago now, back to the Welsh Government. So those expert working groups have been dealing with actually 6 different questions, but they've been in sort of 3 different groups, and that has been the first group has been looking at activities on countryside rights of way access land and also coastal access. The second group, which is probably the most controversial one, is looking at additional activities on public footpaths, and that was the somewhat controversial suggestion of being able to provide cyclists and horse riders access along what is footpaths at the moment. But they've also been sort of considering temporary closures and stock control on rights of way and how to deal with that. And the third expert group, which is the one that I've sat on, it has been to do with the reform of access mapping and also integrated plans. So that one's been a bit more sort of technical on how you make definitive maps more accessible, how you make them sort of stitched together, and ideally provide them digitally so that people can go onto like a portal or something like that and view them. And then also whether there's merit in reforming ROIPs to be some kind of other access plan, be it more integrated or more high level or more detailed or what have you. So the detail of exactly sort of where they're up to at the moment is on there. All of the expert working groups sessions have now sort of finished. Emerging from that were a number of sort of cross-cutting themes, so that sort of ran throughout each of the groups. So we sort of reconvened with some additional groups that were looking at those. Those have now been sort of concluded as well. So that sort of part of looking at it with the sort of stakeholders and experts is concluded. We're now expecting them to put together a report, and we will have some more information, I guess, when that first report is released. I'm a little bit conscious about what I say and what I can't say, because the discussions within the expert working group seem to be subject to some sort of information embargo. So where they're up to is in the report that we provided. But there, and when we have the next update, then perhaps I'll circulate that as well.
Okay, great. Any members? Frank.
Yeah, just a quickie. I was looking on page 3 at the group that reported on Reform 2A, and it's obviously the controversial one, the one that we'll all be concerned about. And it worries me that the kind of options that are in there all seem to be sort of balanced towards getting more use of. Oh, is that me? more use by horses and cyclists. And it's not only the conflict that worries me, it's also the cutting up of the paths. We're already getting a lot of those conflicts happening on public footpaths anyway. And if the powers are extended or some kind of statutory permission or allowance is made, then I think that's going to be worse again. And the only thing that looks sensible is the reference to looking at it on a case-by-case basis. I can't believe that these experts have not realised just how awkward, difficult, unsafe, controversial that's going to be.
Yeah, noted, Jerry.
So, I mean, just to sort of respond on that, I guess. I mean, each of the expert working groups had a balance of public sector, user group, and then also landowner interests. And so particularly the people on sort of 2A, I'm sure wouldn't have sort of missed a trick in any of these arguments, because they're all very sort of well versed in it. The three options that are there would have been the three options that would have been presented to that group, and they would have then sort of discussed the merits and any sort of implications sort of arising from it. I mean, within the groups as well, we did also have the opportunity to suggest which ones were sort of preferred from each of our sort of particular points of view. So, I mean, they look to me like the three options that were presented to the group. Which the favoured option was, I'm not sure, because I wasn't on that group.
Okay.
Okay, Geraint?
Yes, yeah, number 2A is just not very good. Well, I can't see the golf course wanting to allow people to ride their horses across the fairways where the footpath crosses the fairway. And the state of our paths is muddy enough already without the extra cutting up of cyclists and horses. You know, I just can't see it happening.
There's no doubt. We've talked about this previously, haven't we? And we know that the cycling network has really made a case for themselves. We just have to see what they come out with, the expert working group.
Yeah.
And go from there, won't we? Yeah, Sean.
Obviously, there's three different options there. In the event that some of these rights are permitted, where would the cost of adapting the footpaths to allow access fall? Would that be with the landowner or with the council, or?
That will also be a facet of the decision. So they would have sort of considered the different sort of merits and demerits of each of those, and sort of had a discussion about it in the expert group. The recommendation that would then they would have come up with will be in the report when they produce it, and that recommendation will go forward to the minister. So and that will then go sort of through the normal sort of legislative process. What it looks like in terms of like the nitty gritty of who finances it, and so on and so forth, we'll probably have to wait for the report to see what they're suggesting around it. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't give you the answer at the moment, because I don't know which one they've chosen, and I don't know what the discussion was on it.
Yeah, I guess whichever option, the cost of replacing stiles and kissing gates with a more accessible form that lets horses and cyclists through, it's going to be very significant.
Yeah, I mean that was. I've no doubt that was brought up in the expert groups, because I know sort of my colleagues in that were representing the public sector in that group were very conscious of it in their minds. So I'm sure that it has been raised, and I don't know how much weight is put on it. I guess we'll have to wait to see how they attempt to address it by what's written in the report.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Susan?
Oh,
Sorry, for clarity on my part, do they have to pick one of the three options? Can they reject them all?
So, I mean, as to which one you favour, if you were in the expert group, then you'd be able to say which one you favoured or which one you didn't. You could elect not to support any of them, but that wasn't a sort of positive choice. So there wasn't an option saying I don't support any of this. If you didn't do it, then your number just didn't get counted. So there was not an awful lot of incentive to try to reject all of them. But also, I guess the premise sort of going into it was they'd already sort of reached a certain decision on what they wanted to support or what they wanted to look at further. And this was trying to examine how you might sort of deliver it in a way that would make it deliverable. So I can't imagine. I can't imagine there would have been many people not choosing to support one option or another, just because it would mean that their voice wouldn't count for anything. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Jerry. Your hand's still up?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm part of a safety team on private forestry abutting onto NRW land at Riola in the Neath Valley. Now, this has got, I think it's got 4 byways, 1 bridleway and half a dozen footpaths running through it. And it's used for rally car testing, Jaguar Land Rover development, Aston Martin development. And over the years, a constant aggro, people breaking in, ripping up galvanized gates and kissing gates, scrambled bikes, 4x4s, winching the big rocks we put to block the traffic regulation orders on the byway. I just can't see how cyclists and horses and people walking about in the peaceful countryside are going to coexist, really. I do applaud the Blackwood Wood South-North Trail, whatever it's called. That sounds a smashing idea, but generally speaking, I just think it's going to be very troublesome, shall we say.
Okay, Frank.
Yeah, just a thought about the end bit of the report. The published version is supposed to be out by July 2021. Is that then a fait accompli that goes to the Welsh Government, or is that to be a consultation document? Do we know?
So that report, I mean, as far as if I remember it correctly, that report will comprise what the expert working group's recommendations are to the minister. So that's not a ministerial decision or like a piece of legislation suddenly appearing. That is the advice to the minister, and then she will decide what happens with that next, I believe.
So it won't be for public consultation, but the minister could, in her wisdom, decide that she would like to put it out for consultation.
It might be subject for another sort of set of consultation if that's what they decide to do. It might go into a legislative drafting sort of phase based on the broad principles within it, in which that then sort of goes through the ordinary processes for getting legislation in. And obviously there is a significant element of sort of scrutiny that goes into that, just as part of the normal process of creating a piece of statute. But I guess we'll wait for the report to be published and then see what they suggest it is.
Okay, anybody else? I don't see any hands, so great. Okay, that's the agenda covered. I'm conscious that we have spent some time tonight, which has been really useful. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into over the last year, often behind the scenes, not noticed, but you know, the things like getting the grant funding and things like that, and some of the projects you've got on the go, absolutely fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Recognizing what Stuart was saying, obviously there's some pinch points and, you know, pressures now with additional people. We'll just have to see how that works out through the summer and things. So yeah, okay. Unless you've got anything else, Gwyn, I think that's it, isn't it? Probably the idea of the next meeting is, have we got a rough date when that will be?
I'll be looking towards sometimes end of June, early July, Chair. That's
great, Gareth. I appreciate that. Yeah, from my own point of view, I prefer it not to be on a cabinet day. So
well, the only dates I was looking at.
Oh, were they? Thanks for that.
No, I'll read the different dates. Fine. No
Keeps me on my toes. Okay, that's fine. I do thank everybody for coming to this. It's really appreciated. And okay, we'll see you all for the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.